Once you understand that your first emotional reaction can appear before deliberate thought has fully entered the situation, the next question becomes more important. What happens after that reaction appears? This is where people begin to separate. Two people can experience the same surge of anger, fear, embarrassment, or frustration and behave in completely different ways. One becomes consumed by it. Another recognizes what is happening but still gives in to the impulse. A third notices the emotion and deliberately chooses another response. Eventually, with enough practice, some people become so familiar with their patterns that they can change not only their behavior, but the way they interpret the situation itself. Emotional mastery is therefore not an on or off ability. You are not simply controlled or composed, reactive or rational, emotionally weak or emotionally strong. It is more useful to think of emotional control as a progression through 4 broad stages. The first is automatic reactivity. At this stage, there is almost no perceived distance between feeling and behavior. Something happens, an emotion appears, and action follows. Someone criticizes you, and you defend yourself. Someone disappoints you, and you withdraw. Something frightens you, and you avoid it. Something excites you, and you commit before considering the consequences. There is little awareness that another response was available. This is why people operating predominantly from automatic reactivity often describe emotions as though someone else created them. You made me angry. She ruined my day. He forced me to respond. I couldn't help it. The language is revealing because control has effectively been placed outside the self. If another person determines your emotional state, then that person appears to determine your behavior as well. This creates an unstable way of living. Your conduct becomes dependent on circumstances. When people treat you well, you are pleasant. When they challenge you, you become defensive. When plans work, you are motivated. When difficulties appear, you become discouraged. Other people gradually notice this unpredictability. They learn which subjects to avoid. They become cautious about offering criticism. They wait for the right mood before raising important issues. In professional settings, they may stop trusting you with difficult information because they cannot predict how you will receive it. The problem is not that you experience strong emotions. The problem is that everyone around you must accommodate them. Eventually, however, awareness begins to develop, and this moves you into a second stage. You recognize the reaction while it is happening, but recognition has not yet become control. This stage can actually feel more frustrating. Now you know you are angry. You know the email you are writing is unnecessarily aggressive. You know continuing the argument will make things worse. You know you should stop. And you continue anyway. The mind becomes remarkably skilled at providing justification. Normally I wouldn't react like this, but this time they deserve it. I know I shouldn't say this, but someone needs to tell them. Yes, I'm angry, but I'm right. This is an important transition because awareness has appeared, even though behavior has not yet changed. You can see the door. You simply haven't learned to walk through it. Many people become discouraged here because they mistake awareness of failure for failure itself. In reality, noticing the reaction is progress. Previously, the entire sequence happened automatically. Now part of your mind is observing it. That observer is the beginning of choice. At first, awareness may arrive embarrassingly late. You send the message and immediately think, I shouldn't have done that. Later, you catch yourself while writing it. Eventually, you notice the impulse before your hands reach the keyboard. This is how emotional development often occurs, not through a dramatic overnight transformation, but through gradually recognizing the pattern earlier. The third stage begins when awareness becomes deliberate response. You still experience the emotion. Nothing magical has happened to your nervous system. Criticism can still sting. Rejection can still hurt. Uncertainty can still produce anxiety. Disrespect can still make you angry. but the emotion no longer automatically determines the behavior. You notice anger and lower your voice. You notice anxiety and continue with the presentation. You notice defensiveness and ask a question instead of constructing a counterattack. You notice disappointment and give yourself time before deciding whether to quit. At this point, emotions become something very different. They become information rather than instructions. That distinction is one of the foundations of emotional maturity. Suppose a colleague dismisses an idea you care deeply about. Your immediate anger tells you something. Perhaps you feel disrespected. Perhaps the idea matters to you. Perhaps you believe the criticism is unfair. Useful information. But anger does not automatically know the best response. It may tell you to interrupt, to retaliate, to embarrass the other person, to prove them wrong immediately. Those actions may satisfy the emotion while damaging the outcome you actually want. A deliberate response asks a different question. What am I trying to accomplish here? If your goal is to improve the idea, listen. If your goal is to correct a misunderstanding, clarify. If the criticism is unfair, challenge it calmly. If the person is deliberately provoking you, refusing to perform the reaction they expected may be more powerful than giving it to them. This is where emotional control becomes strategic. You stop asking what your emotion wants you to do and start asking what the situation requires from you. That change may appear small, but it transforms the relationship between your internal world and your external behavior. Then there is a fourth stage, where emotional mastery becomes deeper still. You begin working not merely with the behavior that follows emotion, but with the interpretation that helps create and sustain the emotion in the first place. Imagine discovering that you were not selected for a position you desperately wanted. The initial disappointment is natural. At one level, mastery means experiencing that disappointment without sending an angry message, attacking the decision makers, or deciding that your career is finished. At a deeper level, however, you begin examining the meaning you have attached to the event. I wasn't selected, therefore I'm not good enough. Is that the only interpretation? Perhaps another candidate was simply better suited to this particular role. Perhaps there is a weakness in your experience that can now be improved. Perhaps the interview revealed a skill you need to develop. Perhaps this rejection will redirect you toward an opportunity you cannot yet see. The event has not changed. You were still unsuccessful. What changes is the framework through which you understand it. This is not about forcing optimism onto every unpleasant experience. Some situations are genuinely painful. Some losses cannot be transformed into cheerful lessons. Some people behave badly. Some outcomes are unfair. Emotional maturity does not require pretending otherwise. It requires refusing to make the first painful interpretation the only interpretation available. With practice, anger can sometimes become determination. Anxiety can become preparation. Frustration can become curiosity. Disappointment can become reassessment. Fear can become a signal to prepare carefully and proceed with courage. The emotion has not necessarily disappeared. Its energy has been redirected. This fourth stage is difficult because it requires familiarity with your own patterns. You need to know what reliably triggers you, what stories your mind tends to create, what assumptions you make under pressure, and which interpretations repeatedly lead you toward behavior you later regret. And no one operates at the same stage in every area of life. You might remain composed during a workplace crisis and become unexpectedly reactive during conflict with a family member. You may handle financial pressure calmly but struggle with rejection. You may receive professional criticism thoughtfully while becoming defensive when criticism touches something deeply personal. Emotional mastery is uneven because emotional history is uneven. The objective is therefore not perfection. It is earlier awareness and greater choice. Instead of asking whether you are an emotionally reactive person, begin asking something more precise. Where am I reactive? With whom? Under what conditions? Around which subjects? What happens in my body immediately beforehand? What story does my mind usually create? And at what point do I currently notice the pattern? Those questions turn emotional control from an abstract aspiration into something you can actually train. Because the progression is not mysterious. First, you react without noticing. Then you notice after reacting. Then you notice while reacting. Then you notice before reacting. Eventually, you begin recognizing the conditions that make the reaction likely before the trigger even arrives. That is how emotional mastery develops. Not by becoming less human, but by becoming more conscious of the sequence unfolding inside you. And once you can see that sequence clearly enough, you are ready for the next step, learning exactly what to do in the few critical moments when emotion is rising and the old reaction is preparing to take control.